Yo, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back into the Fantasy Headliners. Kyle here with a bounce back episode, talking about a couple of guys who maybe 2020 wasn't the type of season we expected out of them, but maybe 2021 is their bounce back campaign. Can they come back strong this season? What does that look like? We're going to dive deep into two guys here in just a moment. But ladies and gentlemen, thefantasyheadliners.com. If you go over there right now, you can buy your fantasy football draft guide for $20. And once again, in 2021, it is the best deal in the marketplace. You are not going to be able to find a website that offers you as much content as we do for the price point. Over 600 virtual pages, over 340 individual player profiles, exclusive content you can't find anywhere else. Get it in your hands for only $20 this season. You're not going to want to miss out, ladies and gentlemen. It has made a lot of people fantasy football champions over the last couple of years. Help them getting to that point. You're going to want that little extra help this year as well. So what players need to bounce back this season, okay? I got a couple of guys who may or may not be on the bounce back campaign, but that's why we're going to dive deep into these player statistical profiles and see if there's anything that stands out that leads us to believe that 2021 is going to be much better than what 2020 was. My first candidate from the San Francisco 49ers, Deebo Samuel. Now, Deebo Samuel really kind of has gone under the radar, right? Because of Brandon Ayuk. Deebo Samuel missed 9 games last season. You could see it there on the slide. It allowed Brandon Ayuk, as a rookie, to kind of step in and become that wide receiver one type of player for the 49ers. But honestly, is it going to be that way in 2021? If Deebo's healthy heading into the season, will Ayuk still kind of fill that role? I think the answer is yes to both. Because what we do with Deebo Samuel, honestly, isn't going to affect Brandon Ayuk. Let's dig a little bit deeper into that. Right now, Deebo's ADP sitting around the beginning of the 8th round. Wide receiver 37, and somewhere in that area is where you're probably going to be seeing him go. 44 targets, 33 receptions, only 391 receiving yards, and only 1 touchdown. He missed 9 games last season, and then in some of the other games that he played in, he was banged up. He was not healthy all season long. That was a problem for Deebo. Now, so far this offseason, I have to admit, I've had Brandon Ayuk ahead of Deebo because Brandon Ayuk, to me, just kind of fits the profile of what I would like to see the true wide receiver be a little bit better than Deebo. And it's not because Deebo doesn't fit it. It's just because we haven't seen it from him yet because how they've used him. But after I had a chance to dive deep into the abyss with Deebo Samuel's numbers here, okay? Deep enough that we could see Nessie all the way down there, okay? I am all on board Deebo Samuel again. And I will go with Deebo Samuel over Brandon Ayuk. And it is because of the way that they use Deebo Samuel. For instance, on targets that were behind the line of scrimmage last year among wide receivers, Deebo was 3rd with 21 targets and caught all 21 of those targets for 21 receptions, also 3rd place. He had 229 receiving yards, which was 1st. He had 7 missed tackles forced, which was 2nd, and he had 11 first downs, which was 1st. And again, those are all on targets that came behind the line of scrimmage, okay? Those are all balls that he's catching in the backfield, sweeping routes, lots of different things, maybe some screens behind the line. Everything that we can do with him, we're doing with him right there. And Deebo really fits that profile of what Kyle Shanahan loves to do with his offense. And these numbers show you that when he gets the ball in his hands in those situations, he is a scary, scary individual. Continuing with his targets behind the line of scrimmage, he had 10.9 yards per reception, which ranked 4th, 315 yards after the catch, which was 1st. He averaged 15 yards after the catch per reception for 3rd, and then he also averaged 10.9 yards per route run, which was 5th. And again, all targets behind the line of scrimmage. Those are elite level numbers, ladies and gentlemen. For a guy that's put in situations to continuously win, he has the profile of a player to do that. Not only that, but his average depth of target on these plays was negative 4.1 yards. So he was mostly getting the ball 4.1 yards behind the line of scrimmage. It was the 5th lowest. There was only 4 other players that were averaging a deeper depth of target on those targets behind the line of scrimmage. Deebo does a lot with very little. It is not easy to catch the ball 4 yards behind the line of scrimmage and then run off 10.9 yards per reception, okay? Because remember for a second, let's say Deebo Samuel catches the ball 4 yards behind the line of scrimmage. That doesn't count towards his receiving yards. The receiving yards count from the line of scrimmage to wherever he ends. So if he averaged 10.9 yards per reception, that's only counting from the line of scrimmage to where he ended the play. You have to tack on another 4 yards there to get a true statistical view of how many yards Deebo Samuel was picking up after the catch. That's why you're looking at 15 yards after the catch per reception. See how those two numbers kind of line up there? He was catching the ball pretty deep in the backfield, and he was making a lot of players miss, and he was getting a lot of first downs. Now, he wasn't only just doing those targets behind the line of scrimmage. They also use them on a lot of different screen plays as well, and he's just as dynamic on those screen plays. 191 receiving yards, which was first in the league. 262 yards after the catch, also first in the league. 15.4 yards after the catch per reception, 6th in the league. 7.96 yards per route run, which was first, and 7 missed tackles, 4th, which was also first. That all comes on screenplays right there. And that's why I wanted to show you these numbers, because even though those overall numbers don't look great, when you look at these numbers here, it absolutely shows that Deebo Samuel is an elite athlete that makes people miss, that can pick up yards, and can do it in any situation. And that's why I'm not worried about Brandon Ayuk anymore. Both of these guys can live together in this offense. Is Jimmy Garoppolo going to be a guy that can unlock both of them? That probably not. Let's be honest with ourselves. And there's probably not a good chance that we see Trey Lance this season unless Garoppolo is either just playing god-awful or he's hurt. Then at that point, maybe we see Trey Lance a little bit earlier than we would expect. But he opted out of the 2020 season. So to have him opt out last year and then try to come back and play his rookie year, that might not be the best case scenario. I think he sits almost all the year, maybe getting a little play here and there, but not much. So we're going to have to rely on Jimmy Garoppolo. And Jimmy Garoppolo in those plays might actually suit Deebo a lot better than what they might suit Brandon Ayuk. So for me personally, I'm thinking bounce back all the way with Deebo. Again, he's the type of player that can do a lot of things with the football in his hand. Kyle Shanahan understands that, and he puts Deebo in that position. And that's what you want. And that's what makes Kyle Shanahan such a great coach, is he's able to do that with his players. So I'm actually, when my rankings come out next time, Deebo's going to be ahead of Ayuk for me because of this here, because I think he's being used perfectly. And if we get him for a healthy 16 games this year, I think he's the wide receiver 1 there instead of Brandon Ayuk. What about if we head south from San Francisco down to Texas and talk about the Dallas Cowboys' Michael Gallup a little bit? Now, Michael Gallup in a potential bounce-back campaign, I'm not feeling it nearly as much as I am with Deebo Samuel, right? Michael Gallup, right now his ADP is sitting in that 9.07 range, about a round and a half later than Deebo, coming in at the wide receiver 44. 2020 stats. He still had 105 targets last season, which is quite a bit for the numbers that he ended up putting up, and only having 105 targets. It could have been a lot better, and we'll talk about that more here in just a second. 59 receptions, 843 receiving yards, 5 touchdowns. That overall, from a statistical standpoint, is really not that bad. You know, if you have Michael Gallup in like a best ball league, he probably didn't hurt you. If you drafted him last year to maybe be like your wide receiver 2, that probably hurt you a little bit. You know, really the Michael Gallup truthers are the individuals that continue to push Gallup at this point. And he's a talented wide receiver. He's a very good player. But you've got Amari Cooper there, who is the wide receiver one. All right, when Dak's healthy, he looks Cooper's way. You've got CeeDee Lamb there for year number 2. You've got Michael Gallup. You've got Zeke who can catch out of the backfield, okay? You've got some tight ends who Dak actually looked their way last year when he was healthy. So the question isn't about talent, and the question isn't about can Michael Gallup produce. The question is about can Michael Gallup get enough volume to produce. And quite honestly, the numbers last season should have been a lot better than what they were. He was pretty unlucky. And if you watched a video that I did on Jerry Jeudy a few days back and talked about how unlucky he was, Michael Gallup was pretty close to being just as unlucky. Michael Gallup had 22 uncatchable targets in 2020, which was third most in the league, and 23% of his total targets were deemed uncatchable, second in the league. Not only that, but in an area that Michael Gallup really produced his rookie season and where he can really make a big impact in the game are those deep targets. 50% of his targets on deep targets, 20 or more yards down the field, were deemed uncatchable. So for every 2 balls that were being thrown down the field, 20 yards or more to Michael Gallup, one of them was uncatchable. Can't have that. And that's not Michael Gallup's fault either, because he also had 5 uncatchable end zone targets, which was the second most in the league. So he wasn't being hit on those deep passes. He wasn't being hit in the end zone. Those 5 uncatchable end zone targets, if we make 3 of them catchable and he comes down with 2 of them, that's 2 more touchdowns, which gives him a career high. That's a potential for, who knows, maybe another 20 to 50 yards, depending on what the depth of those targets were. Those deep targets, you know, if that uncatchable rate is more like a 30 or a 40%, he adds another maybe 40, 50, 60 yards there. Maybe it comes a little bit closer to 1,000 yards again. So those top layer numbers really don't do a whole lot of justice for Michael Gallup because he was so unlucky last year because he was being overthrown. And that was probably Andy Dalton for the majority of those. To take a little look at, one stat, in all these videos, I like to try and include at least one thing that it still looks positive for the player. I mean, he was targeted 33 times last year in the red zone, which was 7th most in the league. And that number caught me off guard because when you think about those red zone targets, I think a majority of us, including myself, are thinking Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb. Those are the guys that are being looked at in the red zone most often. But Michael Gallup was up there among the league best in terms of being in the red zone and getting those targets last year. And I think in 2021, for him to have a bounce back, he's probably going to have to keep that up. He's going to have to be a lot more lucky than what he was. But I do have some concerns about the volume as well. And there's maybe a couple of different things that we can look at here with Michael Gallup with and without Dak Prescott. With Dak Prescott, he played 5 games last year. And per game, he averaged 5.6 targets, 3.4 receptions, and 69 receiving yards. Without Dak, he averaged 7 targets per game, 3.8 receptions, and 45 yards. So with Dak Prescott, that volume comes down, but because Dak Prescott is a much better quarterback than what Andy Dalton is, and much more accurate down the field, that efficiency down the field comes up. We're getting closer to 70 yards per game with Dak. Without Dak, the volume did go up, over a full target more per game, a little bit more reception per game wise, and 11 games without Dak. But the number of yards came crashing down by quite a bit. All right. So when we look at Michael Gallup and whether or not 2021 can be a bounce back campaign for him, again, I'm not really feeling that big of a bounce back campaign from Gallup. If you look at the numbers tell us a couple of different things. Number one, he's not going to be nearly as unlucky this year as he was last year. Okay. It just won't happen with Dak Prescott and not Andy Dalton being behind center. So he's not going to be nearly as unlucky. We know that some of those volume numbers potentially will come down because Dak is going to look Cooper's way first, and then he's going to look CeeDee Lamb's way, and then Michael Gallup will probably be number 3 or 4 depending on the play being run and whether or not Zeke is going to be that third target. Gallup's number 1 targets are going to be on those plays that are designed to go down the field. The Dallas defense isn't going to be great, so they're going to have to be throwing the ball a little bit, but we'll be consistently working down the field. I don't know. That's probably not something that we're going to see where he's going to get 5, 6, 7 targets a game that are going to be 20 plus yards down the field, where he thrives. A lot of those volume targets where we're trying to push the ball down the field quickly are going to go to Cooper and going to go to CeeDee Lamb. And then again, those other targets are going to go on the outside. So that volume is going to come down.Maybe we see some efficiency. If we can get him back to about 70 yards per game and hopefully get him around maybe 8 touchdowns, you're probably looking at a guy that could fill in as a potential wide receiver 3. But I think that's boomer bust wide receiver 3, right? I think he's going to have some weeks where he's going to end up as a wide receiver 2 because he might have a big play. I think he's going to have some weeks where he might end up as a wide receiver 4 or 5 because all the volume went a different direction. And that's what is going to lead me to believe that we're not going to see a huge bounce back campaign for Michael Gallup this season, because it's going to be a trend that we see where it's going to be a roller coaster. It's going to be some up and down performances. We're not going to see some of the type of performances that we might see with Deebo Samuel, a guy that I do think will bounce back because of the way he's utilized. So for me, Michael Gallup, I'm probably passing on this year. For Deebo Samuel, though, I want to make sure that I get him. If you can get him as like your wide receiver 3, I think you're drafting pretty well at that point. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for tuning into this video. Make sure that you hit that like button here, okay? Don't leave without hitting that like button. If you appreciate the content and the hard work we're putting into these videos, like every single one of them. We really appreciate that. And leave a comment down below. Michael Gallup, Deebo Samuel, what do you think? Are you going to take a shot on him this year? Do you think they both bounce back? And if you're new here to the Fantasy Headliners, the biggest thing that you can do is hit that subscribe button, because I can guarantee you are not going to want to miss the rest of the content that we have coming out this season. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. Thanks so much for tuning into this episode. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch you on the next one of the Fantasy Headliners.